I just watched the final DCEU movie, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, and wow, what a bad way to end it. Hey everyone, welcome back to our movie news. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was the final film in a 10-year cinematic universe, and for me, this film is exactly why the DCEU needs rebooting. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, I really didn't like this movie. For me, if I turn my brain off and mindlessly take in the CGI and jokes, then I'll have a good time. But as soon as I start thinking about this movie and what we have seen before of Aquaman, I suddenly start to feel like I was no longer watching a DC movie and more of an SNL sketch of a DC film with a high budget. And I hate that I've had to be that harsh on this film, because I think James Wan is a really good director and I absolutely love Jason Momoa. But this film was just so disappointing for me. It no longer felt like I was watching Aquaman, but rather just watching Jason Momoa. A lot of his performance felt like he was just being himself rather than the Aquaman character. Not in every scene, because in some scenes he was really great, and it reminded me of him playing Aquaman in the past, but overall this felt like we were watching a film about Jason Momoa. As for the plot, not really anything special. Quite a generic story with generic dialogue that felt like it was ripped out of the rough draft of what you planned to say before you expand upon it to make it sound more sophisticated. Black Manta just said things like, "I'm gonna kill you and your family," and that was as deep as his dialogue ever went, and I was just thinking, okay, let's expand upon that a bit more, otherwise you're just gonna really feel and sound like a one-dimensional character. But no. That was really it. Excuse the pun, but it was a very surface level movie. There's nothing deeper to explore, and it felt like this movie began as an exciting project with a lot of potential, but by the end of production, it felt like everyone involved knew that this movie meant nothing to the future of the DCEU. So it doesn't have a final goodbye or an emotional send-off, but rather just a quick comedic conclusion to get it over and done with. Like the director went, "Well, I tried to tell my story. It's been changed multiple times by multiple regimes, and I know they don't even care about this movie, so I'm just gonna wrap it up as quick as I can." And I really do feel bad for James Wan, because he clearly had one story in mind that has been changed by different executives, and then it has this pressure of being the final goodbye of the DCEU when it was never meant to be. The amount of reshoots they must have gone through to get to this point must have been exhausting for him. You could tell a lot of scenes were trimmed down or reshot, but even still, the dialogue throughout was really poor and the humor was terrible. Even without the reshoots or re-editing, the dialogue and humor made this movie very corny and quite boring. The thing that hurt the most is that this film made me not want the DCEU to stick around. If the DC Extended Universe wasn't ending and Hamada was still in charge and I was now watching Aquaman 2 as just another DCEU movie of many to come, then I think I would stop watching the DC Extended Universe entirely. I'm not expecting cinematic masterpieces every time. That would be amazing, but I'm just looking for DC movies that I enjoy. That when I leave the screening, I go, I cannot wait to see this movie again, and I can't wait for the next DCEU movie. But I didn't get that with Aquaman 2. In fact, I got the opposite. I left the screening and thought, I don't want to see that movie again, and I don't want to watch another DCEU movie. And if Gunn and Safran had watched the last 4 DCEU movies before deciding what to do with DC, then I don't blame them for rebooting. As someone who loves DC and was a strong defender in keeping the DCEU around and trying to fix it rather than jumping ship, after seeing The Flash and Aquaman 2, I get why they think rebooting is the best choice. The DCEU has been churning out underwhelming or average movies and bombing at the box office repeatedly. However, Aquaman 2's action was pretty good. It was probably the strongest part of the movie, and the fights in Atlantis were interesting, but there was really only one scene in the entire movie that I went, oh wow, that's cool. And that was the final battle between Aquaman and Black Manta, but that was only for about 30 seconds before that cool action ended. And I was actively thinking while seeing this fight scene, why couldn't the entire film have this epicness, intensity, and tone to it? And you could feel the scenes that were cut up and reshot too. The first 15 minutes was so clearly changed and it felt rushed. Like there was one idea that they had and then changed it, and in doing so they had to cut up a whole 20 minutes of storytelling into an entire 10-minute recap. It felt so strange because I found myself going, wait, is this still going on? When are we going to get to something that isn't exposition? I don't know, maybe I'm being too harsh on it. I tend to get a far better feeling towards a movie when I see it a second time, but I don't really want to see it again. It felt like one of those comedies that you put in the background and focus on it every now and then, and you wouldn't really miss much. Which is a worrying description. It wasn't really that funny either. There were just so many comedic cliches that it became predictable. It upsets me too because Aquaman was finally being taken seriously. He was this badass mythical character that you wanted to know more about. Now it's back to seeing Aquaman as a joke wearing a bright orange and green costume. I really don't understand this recent obsession with turning every character into a comedic idiot. And I know that sounds harsh, but for some reason, many superheroes now lose their intelligence in order for humor to take place. That's not the only way of creating a character. You can be funny and clever. Tony Stark is the perfect example. An absolute genius, but hilarious. But for some reason, now the only way of being funny in these films are by suddenly losing all your intelligence. In fact, what is this obsession with every character being a comedian? I don't get it. Having a hero that isn't comedic doesn't mean they are boring or one-dimensional or moody. For me, the way I see it is Aquaman 2 did to Aquaman what Thor Love and Thunder did to Thor, from a Norse god to an idiot constantly cracking jokes. I disliked Aquaman so much in this film that I actually preferred Orm to him. Orm felt like he was a better version of Aquaman. He was led down the wrong path and was fed lies about the people on land, but if he was brought up by his mother, he would have been a far better hero than Arthur Curry is. Whilst he was a villain in the last film, in this movie, he actually felt like more of a hero than Aquaman. Sure, we saw Aquaman saving the day, but Orm fought with honor, and when things got dangerous, he took it seriously. At least for the most part, because there is one unbelievably stupid scene with him. Completely out of character, but forced in for comedic effect. But for the most part, he was the brother who cared about Atlantis more and had a much better character arc than Arthur Curry did. The whole movie was just Arthur Curry whining about being Aquaman and king and would just rather drink Guinness, ride his motorbike and hang out with his family. Which a lot of people can relate to and is fine if you're a normal person, but Aquaman is literally a superhero and a king, and all he did was complain about being that. When he wasn't complaining or drinking Guinness, he was cracking jokes. It just felt like the whole movie gave up on the superhero of Aquaman. And Aquaman 2 is quite a generic superhero movie. The superhero has powers, the superhero is a comedian, superhero lacks intelligence in order to be funny, and CGI entertains the audience until the next joke is made. And that is what Aquaman 2 felt like. Big CGI fights to entertain, and the effort into the dialogue was just abandoned. So unfortunately, I didn't like Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, which I am absolutely gutted about, because I have loved Momoa as Aquaman and I was looking forward to this movie and to the conclusion of the DCEU, but I would have to give it a 4 out of 10. Honestly, one of the weakest superhero movies I have seen in a while. And if you have seen the movie, make sure to let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. But that is all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe and turn on post notifications so you never miss a video. I hope to see you here again soon, so until then, have a great day. Bye!